All right, Shabbos, say good morning. I'm sorry, got a little bit carried away with Mesilas Yesharim, Baruch Hashem. Like I said, no idea how they sell it as a 5-minute-a-day program, but it must be a chisaron in me. In any event, we'll say today we are up to Daf Mem Gimel, page 43 in Mesilas Yesharim. In Meseches Nedarim, Daf Yomi. Beautiful daf ahead of us today. Let's begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev. To thank Joshua Becker Friedman for dedicating all of his shiurim this month. Le'ilui Nishmas Josh's father Yisrael Yehuda ben Chaim Rafael. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating the shiurim this month in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Yosef Pepper, Yosef Dovid Ben Yaakov. To thank our week of learning sponsors Ayala and Sarah Steinberg and the Schusa Refuah Shlima for Shulamis Basusha and Hillary and Akiva Kent in memory of Hillary's father Harold Mitnick, Tzvi Hirsch Ben Henoch Efraim. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and all those who require refuah should have one together with Kol Chole Yisrael. We will say, so today's daf is Mem Gimel 43. We are picking up in Yirtzeh Hashem on daf Mem Beis Amud Beis 42b at the Mishnah. So Hamudra Hanoah Mechavero. So we'll say we are still continuing the same case. Actually, in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow, not tomorrow. Friday, we finish the parak. We'll transition to a new set of cases. But for now, the good news is we know exactly what the Mishnah is talking about. Ruvain makes a neder that Shimon cannot derive any benefit from him. So remember again, just to be clear, so Ruvain is the noder, Ruvain is the vower, Shimon is the mudar, the one who is constrained, right? Or the one who is bound by the neder. So therefore, again, Reuven says, Shimon, you can't get any benefit from me. Therefore, Shimon cannot get any level of hana'ah from Reuven. So therefore, Hamudra Hanoah Mechavero, someone who is not permitted, under a neder, not permitted to get benefit from his friend. So in this case, we're referring to over here, Shimon. Right? So Allah Chalamai again, Shimon, who can't get any benefit from Reuven, Lo Yashilenu, V'lo Yishal Mimenu. Ultimately, again, he cannot lend something to his friend, and he cannot borrow from him as well. Now, I will say, what's interesting about these cases, if you look at look at the Ran, last two lines on the bottom, Lo Yashilenu, Mudar Lamadir, will be Gemara Mefarish Taima. And I will say, here's what's interesting. So just to be clear, Reuven makes a neder that Shimon cannot get any benefit from him. Okay, so now what does the Mishnah say? Shimon can't lend anything to Reuven, nor can Shimon borrow something from Reuven. Now I will say, at first glance, already again, it sounds strange. Why? Because Lamaisa, again, I understand why Shimon can't borrow something from Reuven. Why? That's Hanoah. Why can't Shimon lend something to Reuven? So again, we're going to talk about this in the Gemara. Again, look at the Ran, second to last line. So just to point out, the Mishnah is listing the less obvious case and then the obvious case. So Shimon is not permitted to get Hanoah from Reuven. So Shimon can't lend to Reuven. Don't understand why that is. Shimon can't borrow from Reuven. That I understand totally. Right? That makes absolute sense. Similarly, so lo yilavenu for lo yalbimimenu. Shimon can't lend money to Reuven. Don't understand why that is. V'lo yalbimimenu. Shimon can't borrow. Totally understand, right? Because Shimon can't get hanoah. V'lo yimkar lo. Shimon can't sell something to Reuven. Don't understand why that is. V'lo yikach mimenu. But he can't purchase something from Reuven. That I understand why. Because again, that Shimon ultimately again is getting benefits. Therefore, I will say, what the Mishnah teaches me is like this. If Shimon is not permitted to get benefit from Reuven, Shimon can't go ahead and borrow from Reuven. He can't go ahead and, he can't borrow something from Reuven. He can't go ahead and sell something or purchase something from Reuven. What the Mishnah is also teaching me is whatever Shimon can't do from Reuven, Shimon also can't do to Reuven. So the Gemara says, top of Mem Gimel, ask the obvious question. Says the Gemara, Bishlama lo yilavenu tekamahanile. So I understand at the end of the day, ultimately, why Reuven can't lend money to Shimon, or to say it a little bit differently, I understand why Shimon can't borrow from Reuven, because in that case, Shimon is actually deriving hana'ah from Reuven. Ela lo yilavehimenu mai kamahanile. But I will say, why can't Shimon lend money to Reuven? In other words, I understand why Shimon can't borrow from Reuven, because remember again, Shimon is bound by a neder. Reuven said, Shimon, you cannot get benefit from me. Therefore, if Shimon borrows money from Reuven, Shimon is getting Hanoch from Reuven. But why can't Shimon lend money to Reuven? What, in that case, ultimately, again, what is Shimon getting? So the Gemara says, "My kamahanile, ubishlama lo yilav hemenu, v'lo yikach hemenu, de kamis hanimine, elo lo yishal hemenu, my kamis hanimine." So I'll say furthermore, again, I understand that lamaisa, again, Gemara is asking the same kasha. I understand in all of these cases why Shimon can't do these things from Reuven because he's getting Hanoch from him. But what Hanoch is there when Shimon bestows the same type of service upon Reuven, right? What Hanoch is Shimon walking away from? We'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi on the right-hand side. So as I say, I understand ultimately, again, why Reuven cannot lend money to Shimon. Because at the end of the day, Shimon then is getting Hanoch. But for example, why can't Reuven borrow money from Shimon? My Hanoch, Rashi says, what Hanoch ultimately, again, is Shimon getting if he goes ahead and he lends money or lends an object ultimately to Reuven? So we'll say that's the Shaila. So again, just to be very clear, simple construct of a case, Reuven is making a neder, Shimon, you can't get any benefit from me. So I understand when you tell me that Shimon can't borrow money from Reuven, can't borrow an object from Reuven. What I don't understand is why the reciprocal is true as well. That Reuven can't borrow from Shimon. Why not? Or Reuven can't purchase from Shimon. What Hanoch is there involved in that? So we'll say two answers. First answer, Kigon Shenodru Hanoch Zeh Mizeh. Okay, so the Gemara gives a very interesting answer. First answer is, what's the case? The case is a case of reciprocal neder. Reciprocal neder. Reuven made a neder that Shimon can't benefit from him, and Shimon made a neder that Reuven can't benefit from him. So we'll say, so therefore, that's why the Mishnah says, neither could lend to each other, neither could borrow from one another, and neither could sell to each other. Okay, the problem with that answer, we'll say, is what? The problem with that answer is, it's pashut. In other words, okay, fine, they took reciprocal Nedarim, so of course they can't borrow from each other, they can't lend to each other, they can't sell to each other. Okay, that's the first answer. Second answer, good. Abaye says, this is very interesting, Gezerah lishol mishum lahashil v'chim kulhu gezerah. We'll say second answer Abaye gives, or second answer given by Abaye, is that halacha l'may says it's gezerah. What's the gezerah both say? What are we concerned about? We're concerned, for example, that although let's just play this out for just a moment, right? So once again, I apologize for being repetitive, but just we should have the case clear. So what happens? Reuven makes a neder that Shimon can't get benefit from him. So under that neder, I understand that what? That Shimon is not permitted to borrow money from Reuven, right? Makes perfect sense. So now, what Abaye suggested is Chazal stepped in, and Chazal also said that Reuven also can't borrow money from Shimon. Why not? It's Xera. Because we're afraid if there's any level of transactional relationship between the parties, what'll happen? They'll end up reversing the transaction. So although in this case there's absolutely nothing wrong with Reuven borrowing money from Shimon, right? Because remember again, it's only Shimon who can't get benefit from Reuven, right? Reuven is allowed to get benefit from Shimon, so there's nothing wrong with Reuven borrowing money from Shimon. There is nothing wrong with Reuven purchasing something from Shimon. But we're afraid that if there is a transactional relationship established between Reuven and Shimon, although it's permitted for Reuven to have the transaction with Shimon, it could just as easily happen that what? Shimon is going to start borrowing money from Reuven, or Shimon is going to start purchasing items from Reuven. And in which case, again, then there's Hanoch that Shimon is deriving from Reuven, which is usher under this Hanoch. Therefore, under this neder. Therefore, in order to avoid this possibility, essentially, what do Chazal do? What do? They shut down the transactional relationship between Reuven and Shimon. That's what it is. You make a neder with someone that they can't get benefit from you, no problem. In order to safeguard that neder, we shut down the transactional relationship both ways between the parties. That way, again, no possibility of transgressing the neder. Beautiful, beautiful. Mishnah. Amar lo, this is a great case. Amar lo, Hishilani, but I will say now, this is actually not a Mudra Hanoch case. This is not right. This is actually just a regular case. Watch this. So I go over to Reuven. Let's just keep it easy. I go over to Reuven and I say, Reuven, Hishilani parascha. Ruvain, let me borrow your cow. So what happens? Amar lo, eina penuya. Ruvain says, I'm so sorry. My cow is not available. Cow's not available, right? Cow's not available to be borrowed. Okay. Now watch this. Amar, I say, konem sadai shani chorish bali olam. I take a neder, I will never plow my field with your cow. Whoa. Right? So you ever have an exchange like this with someone, right? Where you get over-the-top response to a relatively innocuous question. Right? So again, I'm just asking, right? All I'm doing is asking to borrow the cow. Reuven says, I'm so sorry. Okay, it's not available to borrow right now. And I make this neder, I will never plow my field with your cow. Now both say, look at the Ran for just a moment. So the Ran in the intermediate wide lines, and they're about 5 lines in. So right by the Mishnah, Konim Sadeh Shani Chorish Bali Olam. So the Ran says, Shoel Amar Kach Lechavero Mitoch Kas Shekas Alav Shaloras Al Shielo. So both say it's interesting. When I go to Reuven and I say, Reuven, can I borrow the cow? And Reuven says, I'm sorry, it's not available. I'll say, apparently in this case, how did I internalize that response? That is a shtach, right? That Reuven is he's just being difficult. He's just not lending me his cow. So I get angry. I will say, by the way, what a musar. So I get angry and I make this neder. I will say, what's the musar haskell on this? How often does it happen that people say things we don't like and we just simply interpret it a certain way, and meanwhile we're totally wrong? In other words, all Reuven is saying in this case, not trying to give me a shtach, all Reuven is saying in this case is what? I can't lend you the cow right now. Maybe the cow is sick, right? Maybe the cow is lent out to someone else. A variety of different things. The way I internalize Reuven's words is that he's being antagonistic. And therefore I have this response of kasha. We'll say it's meisim b'chol yom in the realm of relationships. That people say something, I choose to interpret that statement through I choose. They didn't say it in any specific way. I'm choosing to interpret their statement through a particular lens. Maybe because I have a history with the person, maybe because I'm just in a foul mood that particular day, or for a variety of different reasons. I choose to interpret it. And because I choose to interpret the statement one way, it sets off a whole cascade effect, right? It sets off a whole bunch of things. Suddenly now we're in machlokes. Suddenly we're fighting. Suddenly I'm angry. Suddenly I'm standoffish. Why? All the guy just said is he can't borrow the cow. That's all he said. Let's say so much relationship dysfunction happens because of situations like this, where someone says something, and again, I make a choice to interpret it a certain way, instead of just taking a person's words just at face value and not reading any level of narrative into it. In any event, so now I made the neder. All right, so we'll say, so now what? So we'll say, so what's the halacha? Back to the Mishnah. Now we'll say, now here's the interesting part. Now what happens over here? The next day, Reuven comes to my house. And who is he bringing in tow? His cow, right? So now he's showing up and he says, oh, by the way, the cow's available now. So I'll say, now what's my problem? I made a neder, right? And the neder I made is, I will never plow my field with this cow. So now the shaila is, what can I do or can't I do with the cow? I'll say, which by the way, another musar haskell, which is incredible, which is what? Sometimes we back ourselves into a life corner based on the things we say and the way we behave. I'll say, this is why it's so important to be measured in what you say and how you act. Because you say something, you react a certain way, I paint myself into a corner, and now often I can't get myself out because I've created a reality for myself based on the way I've behaved and based on what I said. So now Reuben shows up in my house with the cow. So now watch this. So what do I do? What do I do now with this cow? So listen to this. It says in the Mishnah, Im hayed darko lachrosh. Shabbos said, listen to this. Everything depends on who normally plows the field. If I myself normally plow my field, then darko lachrosh, hu aser v'chol adam mutarim. Here's the good news. I can't use the cow to plow the field, but what? I could call my friend Shimon and ask Shimon to go ahead and use the cow to plow the field. Why? Because since I'm normally the one who plows the field, and I said konam, I take a neder that I'm never going to plow the field with this cow, the neder devolves upon who? Upon me. So therefore someone else could use Reuven's cow to plow my field. The main darko lachrosh. But I will say, if I don't normally plow my field, right? I don't plow my field, I have a guy. Right? So I never plow my own field, right? So I have a guy. In that case, I will say again, because when I made the neder, the intention with the neder was not simply for it to devolve upon me, but really for this cow not to be used in my field. No one could plow the field with that cow. So again, the Mishnah says, just to read it again, good. If I don't normally plow, everyone is prohibited to use that cow to plow my field. I want to say, take a quick look at the Ran. Take a look at the Ran. So the Ran says, I will say once again in the intermediate lines, 2 lines before they end. I will say, remember again, the neder I made in this case is konam sadai sha'ani choreshba. So in case number 1, where I plow my own field, it's clear that I only meant for the neder to devolve upon me, and therefore again, I can't plow with Reuven's cow, but someone else could plow with Reuven's cow. However, the Ran goes on, but if I don't normally plow the field, I have a guy who plows the field. In that case, no one could use the cow. Says the Ran, why? So I will say, in that case where I don't do my own plowing, but I have a guy, when I made the neder, what I really meant to say, what I really intended was, I will not get any plowing benefit from this cow. So therefore, again, no one could go ahead and use the cow to plow my field. Good. So therefore, we'll say, when I make this neder, interesting. When I make this neder, and now Reuven shows up, I make the neder, I'm not going to get benefit from the cow to plow my field. Reuven shows up the next day with the cow. Can I use the cow or not? It depends. If I'm a guy who normally plows my own field, then the good news is we assume I made the neder to devolve upon me. I can't use it, but someone else, Shimon, could go ahead and use Reuven's cow to plow my field. But if I don't normally plow my field, then we understand the neder was intended to say I will not get plowing benefit from this cow, and therefore no one could use Reuven's cow to plow my field. Beautiful. We'll say, let's go back there. So we'll say, next case we actually had all the way in the beginning of the Masechta. And this is a great Mishnah. Listen to this. So now, here we go. Good. Hamud Hana Mechavero. We'll say, so now back to, okay, we escaped from Mudra Hana Mechavero for 3 minutes. Right now we're back to it. So we'll say, here we go. Reuven makes a neder not to confer benefit to Shimon. Or also remember again, you can phrase that 2 ways. Reuven's not going to bestow benefit upon Shimon. Shimon can't derive benefit from Reuven. It's the same neder. Now watch this. Here we run into a problem. Now here's the problem. Shimon doesn't have food. Right? So we'll say, so now what's the issue? Reuven wants to go ahead and help him out. We'll say, by the way, I think Milt asked me yesterday, right? Why would you ever have these cases of someone making a neder, not to, right? Milt asked me this yesterday, not to give benefit to someone else. Right? It sounds like such achzarius, right? It sounds like such cruelty. Let's say, sometimes in life, we all know people that kind of like fail to launch, right? They just can't get on their own 2 feet. And often the reason they can't get on their own 2 feet, both say, sometimes in life, having a safety net is a good thing, and sometimes it's an incredible handicap. Because sometimes you become so reliant on the safety net that you never push yourself to become self-sufficient. So I'm thinking about this, that you could see these kind of cases of Hamud Hana Mechavero. Reuven loves Shimon very much. He loves him very much. Shimon just simply fails to become self-reliant. He's just not getting it together. Why is he not getting it together? Because he's got Reuven. And when you have a Reuven in your life, you're good. You're good to go, right? Okay, I go to work, I don't go to work. I show up, I don't show up. I get it together, I don't go there. Reuven's always there. Well, sometimes your Reuven safety net has to use a little bit of tough love. I will say, how do you bring a little bit of tough love into the world? Hamud Hana Mechavero, right? So suddenly again, Reuven is saying, I love you, but you cannot get one benefit, one little bit of hana from me. I will say, now nothing gets you going in the morning, right? Like someone telling you can't get hana from me. Right? So we'll say the goal is, again, it could also just be that Reuven's a jerk, right? But the other possibility is that Reuven is really trying to propel Shimon to be self-sufficient. Now, we'll say the reason I'm bringing this up, because look at this case. So Reuven makes a neder, Shimon, you can't get any benefit from me, and now what happens? Shimon has nothing to eat. So we'll say, so what do you do? Listen to this. So we'll say, so now, at this point, it's a bit more critical. So now what happens? Reuven wants to help Shimon. The problem is Reuven can't help Shimon. Why not? Because there's a neder. So what does he do? Holich etzel chenveni. So Reuven goes to the shopkeeper, and what does he say? Va'omer, ish ploni mudar mimani hana ve'eni yodea ma'aseh. This is incredible. So Reuven goes over to the shopkeeper. Reuven says to the chenveni, to the shopkeeper, you know what? I don't know what to do. Shimon is not allowed to get any benefit from me, but Shimon has absolutely nothing to eat. And I don't know what to do for him. So what am I doing? I'm telling a story. Right? I'm giving over a narrative ultimately to the chenveni. Am I asking the chenveni to do anything? Am I asking him to do anything? No. Why can't I ask the chenveni to do anything? I will say, why? Because if I ask the chenveni to do something, then it becomes what? My shaliach. Shlucho shel adam kimoso. My agent is an extension of me. And then if the chenveni does something for Shimon, the chenveni is essentially acting on behalf of Reuven, in which case now Reuven is in violation of the neder. Shimon is in violation of the neder. So therefore, again, the most Reuven could do is come over to the chenveni, tell him the story, sipur hadvarim, tell him the story. Hopefully the chenveni is quick enough to understand what it is that's unfolding over here. Chenveni goes and gives food to Shimon, and then what? V'unosein lo uba v'not lo mizeh. And I will say, after the chenveni gives the food to Shimon, then the chenveni could what? Come back to Reuven and say, you know what? I did the chesed, pay me. And that's fine. I will say, take a quick look at the Ran. The Ran says, first a second wide line, Holich etzel chenveni aragel, this is incredible. Rabusa kamash malon, ta'afagav deragel etzlo umakifo tadir. I will say, now the interesting part in this case is, who is Reuven going to? Reuven is going to the local makolet that he always goes to himself. So in other words, this is my guy, right? Reuven is going to his makolet. And he tells his chenveni, that, this is this terrible matzav. Shimon has nothing to eat. So what happens? Umakivo tadir. Now, it's very possible also that at that makolet, Reuven himself often buys on credit. Now the Ran says, therefore, we see, despite all of this, we say, Lo amrinan shlichusei kavid, v'choshekin shim lo amar la'adam miyuchad ela amar kalazan. So we'll say, the idea over here is, even if Reuven has a pre-existing relationship with his chenveni, he's still allowed to do it. Why is he allowed to do it? Because he's not asking the chenveni to do anything. He's simply giving information to the chenveni, telling him about Shimon's compromised set of circumstances. And again, obviously, what does Reuven want? We'll say, what does Reuven want? What does he want? He wants the shopkeeper to give food to Shimon. That's what he wants. But he's not asking for it. So because he's not asking for it explicitly, there is no shlichos that is established. But hopefully, after the shopkeeper goes ahead and does that, he then comes back to Reuven and gets payment for services. But since he was not acting on Reuven's behest, there's no shlichos and no problem violating the neder. Similarly again, the Gemara says, Haya beso livnos, gidro ligdar, sadeo liktzar. Both say same case. Reuven made a neder that Shimon can't get any benefit from him. And Reuven sees that what happens, Shimon's construction project stalled out. Right? Maybe Shimon ran out of money to pay, so he has a house that's half built. Right? Or he has a field that hasn't been harvested. Or a gate, right? Or a fence that needs to be repaired. All of these different building projects where Reuven sees Shimon has run out of money and can't do it. Reuven would now like to be able to help Shimon, but remember again, there's a neder. There's a neder that's here. So what could Reuven do? So Holech Eitzel Apolim Va'omer Ish Ploni Mudar Mimeni Hana. He can go over to the workers and he can say, you know what? Shimon is not permitted to get any benefit from me because of a neder, right? Ve'ini Yodea Ma'aseh. I wish there was some way I could help him. I feel terrible. The guy has fallen down on his luck. I wish there was some way to help him. Once again, Reuven's telling a story, a sob story, right? About poor Shimon who's down on his luck to the workers. Ve'hein osin imo. The workers could then go on their own volition, finish the house, right? Finish the fence, go ahead and harvest the field. Uba'in v'notin schar. And they could come back and get benefit and get payment ultimately again from Reuven. Notice I'll point out also. What's interesting is, okay, fine. We'll talk about this. There are other mechanisms that Reuven could have employed, right? Reuven could also be matir neder. right? He could also annul the neder. But again, in our narrative, it makes a lot of sense. Reuven doesn't want to annul the neder, right? Because annulling the neder could potentially reinforce Shimon's bad behavior of non-self-reliance. In any event, the point that the Mishnah is saying over here is that halacha l'maisa, Reuven could go ahead, tell the narrative of Shimon's current financial predicament, and if the workers or the shopkeeper of their own volition do something, even though they will say, it's clear, why are the workers going to finish up Shimon's home, his fence, reap his field? Why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? Because of the sob story that Reuven told. But since Reuven did not ask them to do anything, they are not considered to be the shaliach of Reuven, and therefore, again, there's no violation of the neder. When they come back to go ahead and get payment, I just want to point out, when everybody comes back to get payment from Reuven, does Reuven have to pay them? Does Reuven have to pay them? No. Reuven doesn't. Remember again, you were my shaliach. Now, so again, obviously, the case like this only works when all the parties know each other, trust each other, and understand what it is that's happening. So like there's a shtickle like wink wink that's happening over here. It's clear what Reuven is doing, and it's clear that the service providers intend on getting paid from Reuven, but it's all technically legal because halacha l'maisa, Reuven is not asking anyone for anything explicitly, and therefore no shlichus is created. Incredible. Rabbi say last case, this is great. So the Gemara says, same case, Reuven and Shimon are traveling together, and same situation, Reuven has made a neder not to confer any benefit upon Shimon. Now what happened? Shimon has nothing to eat. So they're traveling. Shimon will say, what's the chiddush over here? Or what's the additional piece over here? See, in the previous case, when Shimon had nothing to eat, right, there was what? There was a makolet, right? So Reuven could go over to the supermarket owner, right, to the chenveni, and say again, Shimon has nothing to eat. Here Abba say they're traveling. Reuven has food, Shimon doesn't have food. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, so no sin le'acher l'shum matana, changes it to acher, gives it to someone else as a matana, v'halo muter ba. So we'll say, so the ideal way to deal with the situation is, let's say it's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi traveling together. Reuven made a neder that Shimon can't benefit from him. Reuven has food, Shimon doesn't have food, so now Reuven can't give the food to Shimon because that would be a violation of the neder. So the easiest thing would be, Reuven could gift it to Levi. Once it becomes Levi's property, then what? Then it's Levi's. And Levi could subsequently give it to Shimon. That works beautifully when you have a Levi. However, again, the Gemara says, what happens if Levi is not there? So maniach ala sela o ala geder va'omer harehein mufkaron l'chol mishi yachbots. So we'll say if Levi is not there, then what could Reuven do? Reuven could take the food, go ahead and put it down somewhere, and essentially make it hefker. This food is hefker for whoever wants it. V'alo notel, and obviously once Reuven makes it hefker, it's no longer his. If it's no longer his, Shimon can come and take it. And even though Shimon benefits from it, that's not called benefiting from Reuven. Rabbi Yossi says, no, that does not work. So we'll say, if you take a look, good, fine. So we'll say, so that's the last machlok. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, that's what the Gemara picks up. The Gemara is going to pick up on this last case, something the machlokes, Tanakam Rabbi Yossi. So once again, Reuven made a neder. Shimon, you can't get any benefit from me. Now what happens? They're traveling together. Reuven has food, Shimon does not. Except there's a third party there, fantastic. Reuven gifted to Levi give it to Shimon, Shalom al Yisrael. However, let's say there's no third party. Tanakama, Reuven, put the food down, make it hefker, l'chomishitz for whoever wants it, and now Shimon can go ahead and take it. Rabbi Yossi says, no, that's us, that doesn't work. Says the Gemara, I'm Rabbi Yochanan. My time is Rabbi Yossi. Why doesn't Rabbi Yossi hold of that? Why doesn't that mechanism work? Kasavra hefker kimatana. This is incredible. This is fascinating. Rabbi Yossi holds that hefker is just like a gift. Meaning what? Ma matana ad'asem rishus nosing. The rishus makabel. So Rabbi say a matana is only effective when it reaches the rishus of the intended recipient. Right? Which means what Rabbi say? If I'm giving a gift to someone, that gift only becomes the property of the recipient when he actually receives it, which means any time before he receives it, what could I do? I'm the giver. What could I do? I could revoke the gift. I could take it back. So Yossi holds hefker is the same way. Even though, again, you're putting it down and you're saying, okay, the object is hefker for whoever wants it. It's not really. In other words, it doesn't become the property of Shimon until Shimon picks it up. The problem is, I will say, at the moment that Shimon picks it up, where is he really taking it from? Where is he taking it from? The domain of Ruvain. So it turns out that Ruvain is still conveying something, still giving hana to Shimon. I will say, take a look at the Ran for just a moment. So the Ran says, 3 lines are from the bottom. Ma matana ada asim rishus no rishus mekabel. Shim amar hareini no se matana zula ploni yochol laxer bo achi yagia liada shel mekabel. This is interesting in general. Even if you say, right, I say I'm giving a gift to Ruvain. Even though I said it, I made the declaration, I could revoke that gift until the point that the gift actually gets to the hands of Ruvain. Similarly, the Ran says, Af hefker ad da'asi l'rishus zocher. Shenyotzim rishus bailim ad sheyiskebo. Literally, we'll say, even when you make something hefker, the item that's hefker doesn't really leave my domain until it gets into the hands of the person who is now acquiring it. And therefore we'll say, if I want to renege. So in other words, it's very interesting. According to Rabbi Yossi, if I put an object down on the ground and I say, that object is hefker, it's really mine until when? Until when? Someone comes and scoops it up. Just like a matana. If I put a gift down on the table and I say, Reuven, that gift is for you, it's mine until Reuven picks it up. So we'll say it's incredible. Therefore the Ran says, Hilchach, ki zachi ba'mudr mimadr kamsani. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi will say like this. In this case, where Reuven and Shimon are traveling together, Reuven puts down the food, and Reuven says, the food is hefker. Shimon comes and picks it up. We'll say, even though Reuven put it down and said it's hefker, who owns the food until the moment that Shimon picks it up? Who owns it? Reuven. And therefore, it turns out that when Shimon picks it up, Shimon is actually acquiring that food from who? From Reuven. And therefore, I will say, back to square one, Shimon is getting benefit from Reuven, which is in violation of the neder itself. So says the Gemara, I have goods. Gemara's Maser Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Abba says, Va'ala no teva ochel. Right, remember again, we said in the Mishnah that Reuven could put down the food, Shimon could go ahead and pick it up, and it's fine. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi says that it's asur. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yossi, now listen to the Bryce. Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi, Masai, when is that true? When is that true? That this conveyance, right, this making it hefker doesn't work. Bisman shenidro kodem lehefkero. When the neder preceded the act of making the food hefker. Aval on the base. Aval im haya hefkero kodem lenidro harezem mutar. Rabbi said, listen to this. But if let's say Reuven made the food hefker first and then made the neder, it'll be mutar. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. The amrit ad the asi. Let me just read this and we'll explain it. The amrit ad the asi the rishus zocha. So ultimately, again, but if you hold that even when you make something hefker, it remains in the rishus of the owner until the person takes possession of it. Mali nidro kolden hefkero, mali hefkero kolden nidro. So I will say, let's just take a step back over for just a moment. So let's be clear on the case. Let's put this all together. Right? Reuven and Shimon are traveling together. Reuven made a neder. What was Reuven's neder? Shimon, you can't get any benefit from me. Shimon has no food. So Tanakama says, no problem. Reuven, take your food, put it on the ground, declare it hefker, ownerless. Shimon could then come and partake of it. Rabbi Yossi says, no, it doesn't work. Doesn't work. Whereas Rabbi Yossi, what's your problem? Why doesn't it work? So what we're suggesting now is because Rabbi Yossi is like this, that a neder is like a gift. And the same way that with a gift, the object does not become the property of the recipient until the recipient takes possession. Hefker works the same way, which Rabbi said, by the way, is mind-blowing. Because in a million years, we never thought this way. Up until now, Rabbi Yossi, Imam has changed my life, right? Up until now, how did I think Hefker worked? Like the Tanakama. How does Hefker work? You put an item on the ground. You say, the item is Hefker. Rabbi say, what's happened? No. Item is Hefker. Do you own that item anymore? No. I'm done. Rabbi Yossi says, no, not true. You made a declaration, and what that declaration does is it triggers a process. But the process actually is not completed until someone else takes possession of that item. In other words, Rabbi Yossi says, it's still yours. What you've done is, you've essentially articulated a willingness to relinquish your ownership over that item. But that your ownership does not cease until someone else owns it, until someone else actually takes it. So the problem, therefore, in our case, I remember again, the whole chap of Reuven conveying food to Shimon only works if what? Only works if Reuven's ownership ends before Shimon picks it up. Right? That's what has to happen over here. Because if Reuven's ownership transitions into Shimon's ownership, then we have what? Reuven giving hana'ah to Shimon. So what I need Reuven's ownership to cease, object to be ownerless for a little bit of time, even just a moment, and then for Shimon to take possession of it. That's how I need this to work. According to Rabbi Yossi, that doesn't work because that's not how Hefker works. The way Hefker works is, Reuven owns an object, he says, I no longer own it. Okay? Now, what happens? According to Rabbi Yossi, well, Reuven, you do own it. You own it. You own it until when? Someone else comes and takes it. Well, the problem is, therefore, in this case, when Shimon comes and picks it up, now Shimon owns it. But Rabbi say, whose ownership did Shimon take it from? Whose ownership did Shimon take it from? Reuven. And now it turns out that Shimon got Hanoch from Reuven. So Rabbi say, I just want to point out, Rabbi Yossi is a overwhelming chiddush in how Hefker works, right? Unlike anyone else, or our entire conception of Hefker up until now. But again, once he articulates that this is his mechanism for Hefker, I understand now why the case doesn't work. Here's the problem. The Gemara says, I'll tell you why it doesn't make any sense. There's another brisa. The brisa says, when does Rabbi Yossi say that this mechanism of Hefker doesn't work? When is that true? That's true when the neder preceded the Hefker. So it has to be that first, Reuven made a neder that Shimon can't get benefit from him. Then they're traveling together, right? And then he made his food Hefker, right? Then it doesn't work. However, Rabbi Yossi says, if halacha l'maisa, Reuven had first made the food Hefker, and then made the neder precluding Shimon from getting benefit from him, then it does work. Then Shimon could take the food. The Gemara says, I don't understand. I will say it one more time, let's read this inside. The Gemara says, it doesn't make any sense. V'i amrit, Rabbi Yossi, if your entire problem over here is that the owner, Reuven, really retains ownership of the object, even though he made it Hefker, he really retains ownership up until Shimon comes along and takes it. And I will say, what does it matter if the neder preceded the Hefker or the Hefker preceded the neder? In other words, I will say, what matters right now? What matters is there's food on the ground, right? Shimon needs to get that food. So whether the neder came first or the Hefker came first, right now, according to Rabbi Yossi, when Shimon picks up that food, we'll say, what's happening halachically? What's happening? Shimon is acquiring something from Reuven. If Shimon is acquiring something from Reuven, that is a violation of the neder. So therefore, the Gemara says, therefore it can't be that what Rabbi Yossi's problem is a problem in the mechanics of Hefker. That can't be. It has to be something else. So the Gemara says, Hu mosiv la, v'hu meshani la. Says Rabbi Yossi, interestingly enough. So again, so who mosiv la, v'hu meshani la. So he raised the question, and he answers it. Kala noder ein daito al mashehifkir. So we'll say it has to be what? It has to be rather, again, this is actually very interesting. If you take a look at the top Ran. The Ran says, what's the case? Whenever you make a neder, your neder doesn't devolve upon things that you make hefker. So we'll say, take a look at the Ran for just a moment. Top Ran, right hand side. Einachinami, the matzi haderbe, the delay habi. Vimishum asr leila also davar shifkir beferush chayil nidro, elahach haynu taima, Mishum dechala oser nechasav stam ein daito amash hefkir. So we'll say the Gemara says something else. The Gemara says no. I'll explain to you the distinction. Rabbi, remember again. So let's just bring this all together. Rabbi Yosef is making a distinction, right? When is it aser for Shimon to take the food? That's when ultimately the neder came before the hefker. But if the hefker came before the neder, then Shimon is allowed to take the food from Reuven. Why, Rabbi say? It's very simple. Because I will say, when you make a neder, right? Reuven makes a neder that Shimon can't benefit from me. I will say, what does Reuven include in that neder? Only items he owns. What doesn't he include in that neder? Anything that he had made hefker previously. So I will say, so remember again, we've seen this before. Nedarim in general is governed by people's regular das. So my das is Reuven's das is when he precludes Shimon from getting hanoch from him. It applies to anything I own. Anything I made ownerless ultimately doesn't apply. They'll take a quick look at the Rush. The Rush is in the left-hand column in the margin. The Rush says, "Ein dait v'mashe hifkir v'af agav de birshusa kai baser daite dinoder azlinon." Now, we'll say in the Nedarim we go after the das of the vower. Ve'in dait v'alav. So we'll say this is absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful until we destroy it. But we'll say, but listen to this, like most things in life. Now we'll say, so again, listen to how beautifully this fits together. So let's just trace the progression now. So right, we have a Mishnah. Mishnah says, Mishnah says, Reuven's making a neder. What's his neder? I will not confer benefit to Shimon. Shimon can't get any benefit from me. They're traveling on the road together. What happens? Shimon has nothing to eat. Shimon has nothing to eat. So we'll say, Halacha l'maisa again. So now, what's the halacha? Tanakama says, no problem. Reuven, take food, make it hefker, put it on the ground. Shimon can go ahead and take it. Rabbi Yossi, doesn't work. Rabbi Yossi, why doesn't it work? Why doesn't it work? They will say, what's the svara? Because Rabbi Yossi has a different framework of hefker. And Rabbi Yossi's framework of hefker, the hefker item does not become the property of the person who acquires it until he actually picks it up. Which means even though Reuven said the property is hefker, Rabbi Yossi is incredible chiddush, it still belongs to Reuven. Therefore, when Shimon comes and picks it up from the ground, as much as Reuven made a hefker, Shimon is acquiring it from Reuven. Rabbi Yossi does make an interesting distinction. Rabbi Yossi says, however, what does it depend on? It depends on the order of events. Rabbi Yossi says, when is this a problem? It's only a problem if he first made the neder and then made it hefker. In that case, neder is first, then Reuven makes it hefker. So then we say we have a problem. Shimon still can't take it from Reuven because it essentially belongs to Reuven until the point in time that Shimon takes it. And therefore, when Shimon takes it, it turns out that he's getting Hanoch from Reuven. However, Rabbi Yossi says, what's that, Rabbi Yossi? If Reuven first made the item hefker and then made the neder, in that case, Shimon can partake of it. Why? What's the logic there? Because when a person makes it, when Reuven makes a neder, that he can't confer benefit to Shimon, they will say, what items are covered by that neder? What's his das? Stuff that I own. Right? What do you mean stuff that I own? Stuff that I fully own. What doesn't Reuven have das for? Stuff that he already made hefker. And therefore, in that case, Shimon would be permitted to go ahead and take this item on the ground from Reuven, even though the mechanics of Neder Rabbi Yossi are different. So we'll say, we're going to stop over here for today. So again, we have a very laser focus. We'll say, by the way, don't worry, we're totally on track. The next couple of dapim are very short, so we're fine. We'll say, so right now, just what we're holding in the middle is, we're focused on the sheet of Rabbi Yossi. We've given one explanation of Rabbi Yossi based on the mechanics of Hefker, and Meretz Hashem tomorrow we'll advance a second approach to Rabbi Yossi, and then Meretz Hashem see the halacha l'maisa, Rabbi Yossi, shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom, wonderful to see everyone. Mamish like Kibbutz Kol Yosef over here. We have Mr. Ringo, Reb Cherry, Reb Richard, Pinchas, beautiful. We have Eretz Yisrael contingent, South Africa contingent. Hi, Shkoyach, everyone. Have a great day. Oh, of course, our Baltimore contingent as well. Shkoyach, everyone. Have a great day.